I'm Lady Liberty. I've stood here watching people arrive with everything they own in a suitcase, and watching neighbors once look out for each other without even thinking. Somewhere along the way, we stopped sitting on the porch. Do you remember when a front porch wasn't decor? It was a place, a small, ordinary stage, where a neighborhood learned how to be a neighborhood without trying so hard. I've watched this country change in 1,000 ways, some of them beautiful, some of them necessary. But there's one quiet shift that still makes my chest ache when the evening light hits just right. We don't sit on the porch anymore, not like we used to. And I don't mean the furniture. I don't mean the paint color. I don't mean whether you've got a swing or a rocking chair. I mean the feeling, the permission, the unspoken agreement that you could exist outside and still be safe. You could linger. You could wave. You could be seen without being judged. You could belong without having to earn it. And if you're over 60, if you've lived long enough to remember a screen door slamming shut like punctuation, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Back then, the porch was a gentle kind of social media. No filters, no profile, no performance, just people. A porch light was a message, a signal, a soft yes. It meant, we're home, you're welcome, we're still human. You'd hear the sound of someone settling into a chair, the creak, the tiny complaint of old wood doing its job again. You'd smell something simple, lemonade, iced tea, cut grass, a little charcoal from the neighbor's grill drifting over like gossip. You'd see kids on bikes, circling like small planets, their laughter moving down the street the way a breeze moves through trees. And you didn't have to schedule any of it. Nobody sent a calendar invite to sit outside. You just sat. You looked up when someone walked by. You lifted your hand. A wave so small it didn't ask anything of you, just said, I see you. Sometimes somebody stopped. Sometimes it was only for 20 seconds. How's your mama doing? Hot enough for you? You hear about the storm coming? And you both knew those weren't really questions. Not in the serious, modern way. They were bridges, tiny, everyday bridges that kept the water from rising between houses. People talk now about loneliness like it's a private weakness, like it's something you should solve silently, the way you fix a leaky faucet alone, with the right tool. But it wasn't always like that. Loneliness used to get interrupted, not by therapy terms or grand speeches, by a neighbor's voice calling out your name while you were watering a plant, by a kid asking if you'd seen his baseball roll under your car, by a mailman who knew the shape of your life just by the way you signed your name. A porch didn't fix everything, but it did something sacred. It made it harder to disappear. And then, slowly, we stopped. Not in one dramatic year, not with a headline. It happened the way so many changes happen in America quietly, while we were busy building convenience. The first thing we lost wasn't the porch, it was the time. Dinner got later, work got longer, commutes stretched. The evening that used to belong to families and neighbors got rented out to everything else. Then we got air conditioning that actually worked. And listen, no shame in that. I know what those summers felt like. The heavy heat that sat on your shoulders like a wet towel. The way a humid night could steal your breath. Air conditioning was a blessing, but it also pulled us inside. We went from being out where we could see each other to being behind glass. Then came garages. Not just a place to park, but a small private tunnel. You could come home, press a button, disappear, no wave. No porch light conversation. No, hey, you made it. Just a quiet door closing, and the neighborhood never even knew you were there. We stopped entering our homes from the front. We entered from the side, and something in the soul of the street shifted with it. And then, little by little, we stopped knowing each other, not because we became cruel, but because we became busy, and busy is a polite kind of distance. Busy lets you avoid the awkwardness of being human. Busy lets you keep your heart in a locked drawer and tell yourself you're fine. I've seen people who would absolutely show up for a neighbor in a crisis, but would rather chew glass than make casual conversation on a Tuesday. Because casual conversation requires one thing our modern lives don't practice anymore: unstructured presence. Just being there. No agenda. No purpose besides I'm alive and you're alive too. And that's when the porch started turning into a symbol instead of a habit. A place you decorate for photos. A place you sit once a year on the 4th of July with a little paper plate and a sparkler. Then you go back inside. And here's the part people don't like to admit. Some of us stopped sitting on the porch because the world outside started feeling less safe. I'm not talking politics. I'm talking about something simpler and more human: trust. There was a time when your block felt like a small village, when the adults were quietly watching, even if no one said so, when a kid could fall off a bike and 3 different houses would notice, and someone would bring out a band-aid like it was nothing. Now, people are more cautious, more guarded, more aware that not everyone means well. Some of that awareness is wisdom, but some of it became armor we never take off. So we stayed inside, and we told ourselves it was just how life is now. But I don't think that's the whole truth. I think a lot of people didn't stop sitting on the porch because they didn't want to. I think they stopped because they didn't feel invited anymore. Because someone moved in and nobody introduced themselves. Because the neighborhood changed and nobody explained the new rules. Because after a few years of waving at people who didn't wave back, your hand starts to feel heavy. And you start thinking maybe you're invisible. Or worse, maybe you're unwanted. If that's you, I want you to hear something clearly. Being unseen is not proof that you don't matter. It's proof that the world got distracted. And I'm not saying that like a cute quote. I'm saying it like a witness. I have stood here through wars, through celebrations, through generations learning how to live with each other. And I can tell you this: people don't stop needing people. They just forget they're allowed to. Especially when they get older. Especially when the kids move away. Especially when the phone doesn't ring as much. Especially when the world starts speaking a language that feels too fast. That's the other thing the porch did. It slowed the language of life down to something you could actually feel. A porch doesn't require you to keep up. It doesn't demand a new app. It doesn't punish you for being quiet. It simply says, sit, breathe, listen, be. And that's why it hurts. Because what we lost wasn't a piece of architecture. It was a shared rhythm. Now, I'm going to tell you something that might surprise you. I don't believe the porch is gone. Not really. I think the porch moved. It moved into smaller moments. Because that's where we still have power. It moved into the way you greet the cashier at the grocery store. It moved into the decision to step outside for 5 minutes at dusk, just 5, and let your face meet the air. It moved into leaving your curtains open a little, letting your home look lived in instead of sealed. It moved into writing a note for a neighbor instead of only liking a post. It moved into sitting on a chair in your driveway and reading. Not because you're lonely, but because you're present. And yes, sometimes it moved back onto the porch. The real one. Even if you feel silly at first. Even if you feel like nobody does that anymore. Let me say something gently. Somebody has to start. A neighborhood doesn't become warm by accident. Warmth is a decision. A small one, repeated. So here's a tiny porch experiment. No pressure, no big dramatic transformation. Pick one evening this week. Not the busiest one, not the perfect one. Just one. Before the sun fully disappears, step outside. Sit where you can be seen, not for attention, but for contact. Hold something. A cup of tea, a book, a folded newspaper. Something that makes your hands feel natural. And then do the simplest thing. Look up. If someone walks by, nod. If they meet your eyes, let your face soften for 1 second. That's it. You don't have to perform friendliness. You don't have to become anyone's best friend. You're simply reopening a door. The same kind of door that used to be a screen door with a spring that snapped it shut. A door between lives. Because here's what I know about people. Most of them are starving for the same thing you're starving for. They just don't know how to ask anymore. And maybe, just maybe, they've been waiting for someone like you to remind them If you're listening to me right now and you feel that ache, like you missed something you can't fully name, you're not alone. You're not old-fashioned. You're not stuck in the past. You're remembering something true. You're remembering that community used to be an everyday habit, not a rare event. And I want you to keep that memory, not as a sadness, as a seed, because seeds don't look like much. They're small, quiet, easy to overlook. But you put them in the right place, give them a little attention, and one day you look up and there's shade where there used to be nothing. That's what a porch was. Shade. A little shelter made of wood and trust and routine. So if your porch is still there, even if it's dusty, even if the chair hasn't moved in years, maybe this is the week you let it breathe again. And if you don't have a porch, an apartment, a condo, a place with a small step outside, then make a porch out of whatever you do have. A stoop, a balcony, a front step, a bench at the edge of a park. What matters isn't the architecture. It's the signal, the quiet message to the world. I'm here and I'm still open. Before I go, I want to ask you something real. What did your porch sound like? Was it cicadas and laughter? Was it a radio playing low from inside the house? Was it your dad's voice? Your mother's quiet sigh? A neighbor calling out from across the street? Tell me, not for nostalgia's sake alone, but because when you name it, you keep it alive. And somewhere out there, someone else will read your words and feel less alone. And that is how we build the porch again. One evening, one wave, one soft hello at a time.